Hello everyone. A massive welcome back to Maverick Mind. I hope you're all doing well, and a massive welcome to anyone is brand new here. This week I am joined by Cindy Brockway. She is an educator, a mindful living guide. She's a specialist in boundaries and somebody who really brings this calming, grounded presence to the show. Cindy has spent a very long time, or a very big chunk of her life, working with children with emotional and learning needs. And you can really see now how that experience not only shapes the way that she is now, but also the way she talks about self-regulation, presence, and coming back to yourself. None of it's a theory, it's all been lived. We talk about what actually drains creative people and why your spark never really disappears, even if you feel like it's gone, and how stillness doesn't always have to look like the big retreat or the long meditation. For Cindy, it actually shows up in her jewelry making and working with her hands, creating something tactile and beautiful, and finding her way back to calm through craft. She says her own experience with burnout, as do I, and the medical leave that changed her life, and why courage rather than productivity is now the center of everything she does. If you're somebody who tends to overcommit, runs at full speed until your system crashes, or feels disconnected from yourself or your creativity, then this episode will be a really good one for you. So, Cindy, a massive welcome to Maverick Mind. Cindy, a massive warm welcome to Maverick Mind. What an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
And thank you. It is so good to be here on this show and to be a part of your mission and your passion.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really excited to dive into a lot of what you do now and a lot of your story. But I think we kind of have to start in this place because you're a bit of a woman after my own heart. I've been teaching mindfulness meditation for a very long time. And I know that mindfulness is a big kind of aspect of the direction that you've taken in life. So I kind of want to jump off and start with, how did you come to mindfulness or mindful living?
Well, I think it really was part of my overall being because I am an educator. I've been working with special needs children for over 30 years. And when you work with children that don't have a really good internal locus of control, then you are often showing them by example and through your routines and things, even in the classroom, how to be more mindful and, how to kind of self-regulate. And so that was something that I just did for many years. And when I was working with other teachers, educators and service providers and parents and stuff, it always seems to come back to that mindfulness piece, helping people to just become more self-aware and less reactive. So that's where it came from. Probably, just from working with special needs children and their parents for all those years.
Love that. I've never heard of that route into mindfulness before, but I love that. Was that kind of part of your training in that kind of field of work, or was it something that you supplemented with because you could feel like it was a need?
Right. We do talk a lot about emotional strategies and things in our training, but the mindfulness piece is really something that I developed early on because I saw a need for it in the classroom. And so I just feel like, and that's probably why I got to get invited to some, what do they call teacher training sessions and things, because I just had a unique way of helping my students to be able to assimilate to a classroom setting.
That's amazing. And it's so inspiring as well, just to kind of really see through everything and what was underneath those people and what they actually really needed. That's a real kind of nod to your kind of attunement or sensitivity and your mindfulness embodied within yourself as well.
Well, and people, if anyone's familiar with someone that has emotional needs or learning disabilities, you really can't get to the education piece until you are able to get them to a place where they can listen and calm down and, be kind of in a space to learn. So that's really the first part, I think, about learning and growing is the very foundation of being mindful and being able to be settled. Um, and a lot of children with special needs, they have a real hard time being settled.
Yeah, for sure. How did life kind of take you into that part of working with children with special needs?
Well, it was just something that I felt led to do. I started in elementary education, just regular general education, and just being, I guess, feeling and having this internal desire to help children that were falling behind, struggling, had, multiple disabilities, and making education be more meaningful to them. So I just decided early on to branch out into the special education field because I feel like meaningful engagement, which is just another word for being mindful, it just enhances your life so much. And for me, the education piece with my children was just, kind of the bouncing off place. And so I just went into that field and I got a little bit more certification in working with children with autism, and it just kind of branched out from there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just like feeling called to nod to because I think a lot of the listeners, well, not all, but a lot of them will have something going on. There's a lot within creatives. We're either highly sensitive human beings, or sometimes we can have other things going on as well. But I would say a lot of the time we need a little bit of help sometimes just to regulate ourselves back to kind of ground level in order to be able to create our best work. So no matter kind of somebody's background or makeup, do you have like a few really actionable things that somebody can do to come back to that base level so that they can create their best work?
Yes. And, when you think about creativity and people sometimes feel like they've lost their spark or they just don't have the desire that they used to have, and I'm just a firm believer that that creative spark doesn't die. It just gets buried under doing too much. And um and so I feel like when we get busy, and I call it busyness, and it's and there's two ways that I like to look at it. You've got busyness when you get overwhelmed, or you go into procrastination mode when you get overwhelmed. So you either work, 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 and you do all these well-meaning tasks trying to keep yourself busy and feel productive, or you kind of get stuck and you're unable to make the decisions you need to make, and so you get real you start procrastinating on things like that. And I think the biggest tip is the power of stillness. And, looking out for those silent signs of burnout, like that hidden emotional and creative blocks that we have as busy, passionate, multi-passionate people. We don't realize that it's some of the things that we are doing on a daily basis that are actually draining our energy, and so, and then when we feel all that pressure and we put all that pressure on ourselves, then we just continue to drain ourselves. And I feel like that stillness piece, going back to that awareness, getting that foundation um, built back up underneath you of calm and steady and clear thinking, that's going to break that cycle of over busyness or feeling stretched thin, or like, like you're not creative anymore. So just learning to do less and to tune in to, to that inner locus of control that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I really agree. And it's something that I teach a lot as well, obviously, because I've been teaching meditation for a long time. But it's also, I'm going to say it to the audience listening, that I'm absolutely 100% not perfect at that. I get overexcited. And it's not even like it's not even like I'm doing loads of things from a space of pressure or necessarily like a should. It's because I get too excited about things. I'm like, I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this. And I completely overextend, or like over, what's the word? Um, like I
Well,
think I have
maybe
more capacity than
overcommit.
I actually have a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we tend to overcommit because we are creative and we can pull things out of the hat and just do things off the cuff. But, over time, when you're constantly do, and creating and everything, it can wear on you. So just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should do it all the time. And that's where the power of that stillness comes in, is being able to slow down, because when we're busy and when we're enjoying what we're doing and when we feel compelled to be creative, burnout can still creep in there. And that's something that I think we want to be cognizant of, so that we don't so-called lose our spark, our creative spark.
Yeah, definitely. I think that stillness too, it kind of puts us in the space you really need for your most authentic ideas to come through. It could put you in like a receptive space, I think.
Yes, and when I say stillness, I don't mean doing nothing necessarily. I mean, meditation is good, but even doing something that is a quiet therapeutic activity that you can do, that sort of, because for me, I can't just sit still. I have a real difficult time with that, because my brain is constantly talking to me and wanting to do things. And so art kind of became my quiet therapy, and in the form of jewelry making. And so when I am making jewelry, hammering all the copper pieces or whatever, my brain, my mind, my emotions, they just kind of open up, and it's rejuvenating. So that stillness doesn't just have to be sitting still and meditating, or trying to go part-time or whatever it might be in your job. It's really become coming up with some strategies, some rhythms in your own personal time that you have outside of what your career might be or your business, that can just be quiet therapeutic activities. And I'm a firm believer in putting a tactile piece to our healing journey. So things that we can hold or smell or see, make a kind of have visual, tactile ways of turning in to ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. I think a lot of the listeners will resonate with whatever their creative thing is, whatever they create, whatever they're most drawn to. When they're in a good space, being that space of stillness or calm, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
How did you get into jewelry making?
Well, it really was just a time for me to ignore what was going on, because I was going through a really tough time emotionally, and some issues with personal loss. And I just needed to be by myself. And I had some beads and some wire, and I would just spend time creating. And sometimes even with tears running down my cheeks, I would be working on things, and just losing myself in all of the components to jewelry making. And it was just something that I picked up. And I had actually tried to make jewelry, like 10 years before this, and it just didn't work out, but I still had the supplies. So I went ahead and got the supplies out and I just started making things, and it really turned into a form of healing for me. And eventually it turned into a business too, because I started my Etsy shop I have that I started, what was it, in 2010, um, as kind of a divergence, being a always on special education teacher was very demanding. And that jewelry part was more creative and relaxed and fun. And so I just kind of decided that was going to be my way of getting time to myself. So that was kind of a long answer to a short question, wasn't it?
No, but I love that answer. I think that's definitely a really great kind of story entry into something that became a like safe haven for you, I suppose, or
Yes, yeah.
your joy amidst a lot of lifing. Um, Now
Yes, yeah.
becoming a a business. I would love to know, because a lot of people that will be listening are people who are trying to make a business or trying to make their life from the thing that they create. Is there a way that you have managed to maintain that feeling of stillness while you're creating the jewelry and allow that to be separate from it now being something that you make money from?
Um, Well, I think when I am working on jewelry, I make a lot more pieces than I necessarily use in my business. Um, and for me, I've started kind of fine tuning. So I have a little piece of my jewelry business that I am creating that is simply for meaning and beauty and not necessarily to buy. So by that I mean I'm developing a what I call the Clarity Stone collection. And I buy specific stones for certain meanings and things. And I put that together. And so some of the stuff, like I said, it doesn't even end up in my shop. It's just things that I have and I enjoy working with. And that's the piece that I think helps me to stay calm. And but even if it's that, I mean, there are times, even though jewelry can be calming for me, there are times when it can be very stressful. And so I just walk away from it, actually, just walk away. We camp a lot too. And so that helps me do, spend some time, quiet time in nature. Because I think whatever we do as a creative endeavor, sometimes we get into that mode where we feel like we just got to push, 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 push. And if we're not doing something, we feel like we're falling behind, or we are wasting our time. We're not using our time wisely. Um, and I think learning to soften up a bit on ourselves and give ourselves time to step away from those creative endeavors um, helps too. It just brings that peace that we're looking for. And I think that self-awareness piece is really the bridge between that creative, busy, and maybe even almost burnout to our next breakthrough. So we've got to have time. We need to make time for that self-awareness piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes as a creator, you kind of have to unlearn a lot of what society tells us a successful life should look like. Because I think we're taught that you to be successful, you need to be busy all the time. You need to be also you need to be doing the big things, and you need to be doing a lot all the time and kind of really stretch yourself and do as much as you can. But actually, all of that advice is completely counter to what's actually going to make you a more innovative, creative person. Because as you said earlier, you know, to be creative, to live creatively, you need space in your life to find stillness and receive those ideas. You need to offload that pressure, and you need to live in a way that is really authentic to you. And you only find that out through doing the self-awareness piece that you teach and share too.
Yes, I agree. In order for our creative endeavors to be sustainable, we do need to come back to ourselves on a regular basis. And I kind of believe in being proactive when it comes to that personal balance piece. I call it like anchor moments. And it's making space to invite that piece in that you need. Notice, what your needs are in the moment, and just coming up with practical ways, little anchor moments throughout your day that help you rejuvenate in the midst of everything. I mean, a lot of times we go, 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 go until the weekend, or we go, 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 go until we have vacation. And, I think it's important that we create a life that we don't have to feel like we have to get a vacation just to be able to unwind a little bit, and just come up with creative ways in your own personal, spiritual, emotional space that's going to help you sustain your energy over time so that you don't relapse into that burnout. I mean, sometimes I feel like people go from burnout to, okay, they feel better, and then they start going, kind of over committing, over extending themselves, and then they're in burnout again. And I think it's better for our creative psyche if we are able to pause within the process. And I go back to the classroom scenario, and in order for my children to be able to learn best and to be able to share what they learn, they have to learn how to self-regulate. And we as grown-ups have the ability to do the same thing, become better at self-regulating.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really glad that you said that piece about maybe finding small ways to find that or regulate or find peace throughout the day. Because I think often when we kind of snap out of that programming of thinking that I was talking about earlier, people go so
Yes.
far to the other side into this like really soft living. I now don't do anything. And then we don't feel creatively fulfilled. And also, I am a big believer that creativity, you need to keep making things, because a lot of the time, and not with everybody, but I'd say often I see it witnessed in a lot of people, and I've also experienced it myself, that sometimes when you go through phases where you're not really creating stuff, then anxiety and other things can start to kind of take hold of your mind because you're
Mm-hmm.
not expressing whatever you're taking in outwardly. And I don't think that we need to completely go to the other side of the spectrum at all. I think it is exactly what you're saying. It's about finding ways to do both, to keep making stuff, to keep doing your business if you have a business, or keep putting yourself out there, and finding these small ways to maintain your calm, maintain spaciousness, and maintain kind of presence throughout the day. So are there kind of some really small examples or tips or practices that you have that could be those tiny moments that people can take?
Well, I think one thing that I like to share with people, like, is digging into what triggers your feeling of overwhelm or whatever. There's a lot of triggers, emotional triggers, situational triggers, people that can trigger us. and kind of identifying these people, these places, these events, these tasks that seem to be draining us, and then using some strategies to move beyond those. So, first of all, just mapping out what's going on. And let's just specifically, if something happens and you are just completely stressed, think about what it is that caused you to be stressed, how you responded, how did you feel during that time, and then kind of mapping out how you want to respond differently next time. So that's that awareness piece right there. And one exercise that is so helpful for me, yeah, I've done it many different times, is to write a compassionate letter to myself and speak to myself. You can either speak to yourself as a guru and tell yourself how wonderful you are and what it is about you that is so creative and unique and amazing, or write a letter to yourself, a compassionate letter, as if you are the mom and you're talking to your younger child, and just being more compassionate with yourself. And then using that letter to remind yourself often that that what you're looking for, that peace that you feel is elusive at the time, it's there. It's still in there. You just have to remind yourself of that.
Yeah, definitely love that. I love that idea of writing the letter. I've seen so many like people saying for different things to write letters. I think it's the era of writing letters for things. But definitely. Um, I'd love to kind of again kind of going on the same tangent or same line. What are in your experience and people that you work with and things that you see now, what are some signs that people can look out for of like that slow creative burnout starting to creep in?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you kind of lose your spark. You're just feeling like you're kind of dragging. You're feeling tired, but you really don't know why. Um, excuse me, that silent burnout piece, it often is just you not wanting to be around people as much as you did, wanting to stay home more. And that is, doubting yourself, starting to doubt yourself. That is another, to me, that is another sign of silent burnout, is you start doubting yourself and you start questioning what you do. And so there's just a lot of different things that we can look for, and it depends on you. I mean, maybe you're not getting eating properly. Your routine, you usually eat healthy, but all of a sudden you find yourself snacking a lot and grabbing the bag of chips or something like that. That can definitely be a sign that, you're feeling a little um just a little tired and worn out. And burnout doesn't have to be this big, massive thing. However, I feel like those little things that we are that signal that things are just not 100%, they can build up. Um, and for me, sometimes it's being more weepy, crying a little bit more than than I'm comfortable with. And I all of a sudden realized, I'm getting tired and worn out. So those are just some of the examples that I think of when I think about that silent burnout.
Yeah, definitely. That I can definitely resonate with that and definitely see a lot of that in past experience of my own or within people that I've worked with as well. And it does kind of creep up on you. And some people we do think that a burnout is like this big thing that all of a sudden you're really exhausted and can't do anything. But actually, as you say, it is like a kind of, there are many tiny little steps and tiny signs before you get there that you can, that if you notice the small thing, then you can make the change so it doesn't turn into the big thing later down the line. Because I find burnout for creatives, if you do go into like the big burnout, maybe the small one as well, but I would say from my experience anyway, because I experienced quite a big burnout there when I closed my last business, or towards the end of closing my last business, which was a fashion business. And then often after that, when you're trying to recover from it, our nervous system then doesn't feel safe doing the thing that we love. Like, it doesn't actually feel safe to create, because then you have this subconscious belief afterwards that if I create things, I'm going to get back to that space. I'm going to get back to that burnout space. So then your body actually has this resistance to making stuff afterwards. I find.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And it's like it builds up in layers, just layers of emotional strain that just build up, and it causes you to feel stressed, and it's almost like things are just not um flowing like they used to. You feel kind of a disruption in the grand scheme of things. And I think another sign too is that we maybe get easily distracted, and we can't stay focused. Maybe we are just getting busy volunteering and doing all this other stuff, that's keeping us from doing what we really want to do. And we're just keeping ourselves busy. And to me, that just adds layers of emotional strain. And then we end up juggling so many different things that we can't be the creative person that we want to be. And I agree with you that sometimes we think that once we stop and we try to address the burnout, we think if we started again, we're going to go down that same trail. But actually, sometimes those things can really lead to healing, because they put you in a position where you just have to think of maybe new or different ways to do what you were doing in the past and what you love to do, but with a few more boundaries in there, with a few more what I call those anchor moments throughout the day, so that you can manage the emotional piece along with that busy, active, physical piece of creating.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that once, sometimes you have to experience the other side to choose to create a lifestyle or boundaries in your life to be able to preserve your own energy. I do think sometimes you have to kind of go a bit too far to understand it, understand what it feels like. But for anyone listening that they might be struggling with kind of having a lot of what I call like the shoulds of life in their life, of creative living in their mind. Like they feel like they should live a certain way, that they should be a certain way, that they should, or in order to achieve success, they need to do X, Y, and Z. Are there things that you've experienced that maybe can give somebody the empowerment to actually choose what is right for themselves over all of that stuff?
Well, I think we just start right where we are. Often we feel like we need to have a big, massive change, but I think if we just start right where we're at, right in the middle of the burnout, of the questioning, of the self-sabotaging talks, and just talk, thinking on our part, and reflect on the moment. What is having us feel overwhelmed and frustrated, and what's keeping us off balance? And just be open and honest and write it down, get it out there on paper so that you can at least start from there, and just start learning how to create a routine throughout your day that promotes that inner peace that you're looking for and helps you to stay grounded. And I just feel like our daily rhythm is what's going to make the difference in being able to nurture our creativity, or overwhelm us. So it's those little things in our daily rhythm that helps us to get anchored on a regular basis so that we're not um, facing the this up and down so much. We're becoming a little bit more regulated, and it's easier for us to, when things do get chaotic, it's easier for us to bounce back because we're already kind of in that state of self-regulation.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is kind of, I definitely agree that it is more within your daily routine. People believe that it's going to be this like big switch, but it's actually how you're showing up every single day makes such a huge difference. And kind of in that light, I know that you work a lot around courage as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
kind of love to know how that became such a pillar within your work.
Well, I think for me personally, as an educator and working for the Department of Public Instruction and the like you said, the cultural expectations of teachers is to be always on, always helping, always supporting. And I did not have that personal courage it took to set more clear boundaries, to take care of myself the way I needed to be taken care of, and ended up with being on a medical leave. Actually, I was on a medical leave for 3 months trying to pull myself back together and to evaluate what are some of those emotional buffering techniques that I need to put in place. And you have to have that courage to be able to do that. You have to have the courage to be able to dig into what's going on and to question yourself and ask yourself the hard questions. So I kind of feel like I am a courage coach in that I do encourage people to tap into that inner strength, to look at what you're doing, to figure out how you want to respond, and then be courageous enough to do that, to live in that clarity that you've got.
Yeah, definitely. It takes a lot of courage, I think, to, well, one, to turn inward, turn in towards yourself. I think it's sometimes one of the most brave things that we do and the most vital thing a human can do to be able to do that and sit with and have the courage also to sit with your own emotions and sit with yourself and kind of go down that route of understanding this person and realizing that you're not like everybody else. So you can't take everybody else's advice. You have to feel what is right for you. And then also courage again for a creative person to express all that stuff outwardly in a really authentic way. That is something a lot of us really struggle with because sometimes when you're creating something, it feels like you're walking around naked. So, is there anything that you kind of guide people through to maybe make peace with who they are or what they're expressing?
Well, I think it is just about moving in, recognizing recognizing what it is, what those triggers are that keep you from wanting to do that on a more consistent basis. And to me, it's almost like you're building a garden, and you are in the garden, and there are things that are growing in the garden, and you want to get to the root. Like if you've got weeds, things that are causing problems, get down to the root of what's going on and then pull it out so that when you are cultivating that garden, it's going to look beautiful. Um, it's that really desire to dig in deeper and to get serious about it. So many times I think we put up a shield and we get maybe defensive, um, when we are in a space where we're feeling overwhelmed or underappreciated, or there's too many expectations on us. And I think if we can uh, become more open to saying to ourselves, that this is what we need to do to protect ourselves. You know, I think that's, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like people think that when they do things that protect their own peace, whether it's setting boundaries, or saying no to certain things, they feel guilty. And I think the important thing is to not, um, it's not that you're not going to feel guilty, because sometimes I still do. You know, I still have that guilt come over, but then I remind myself, that I am doing it for a reason, and that other people don't necessarily have to understand why you're doing what you're doing. They're going to put their own labels on it anyway. But you know what you're doing. So when people say, well, she's not being cooperative, or she's pulling back, or she's not a team player, um, that might not be the case at all. It's just that that's how other people perceive it. But you know that you are being courageous, and that you are listening to your own needs, and you are putting yourself in a space where you can feel more harmonious in what's going on within your life at that time.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of want to go into that guilt piece because I think that's a really interesting thing. I think a lot of us, especially if you are starting to like set boundaries with people or even just live in a way that's really in alignment with yourself, and if that is quite against what we're taught or supposed to do, we can feel a little bit of guilt or shame. And it's funny because I used to say guilt's like the most that what did I used to say? It was like guilt's like an empty emotion. I used to think this, I don't anymore, but I used to think it's like an empty emotion, or it's kind of like a wasted emotion because it doesn't really help anybody, right? But actually, over the years, I've come to realize and come to notice that guilt is actually one of the biggest kind of portals for a lot of self insight, to understand
Mm-hmm.
a lot of where you are extending yourself, where you're trying to people please, where you have somebody else's narrative running through your mind that you don't even believe yourself anymore, you know?
Yep. Yeah. And there are a lot of things around us that um, that are trying to get in there, and because we live in a very busy, um, I guess, hyper mobile, hyper everything, there's so many avenues to stay busy and do things, and there's so many people wanting to tell you what to do and how to do it and where to do it and when to do it. And we want to sort of put up some mental or emotional barriers that kind of protect ourselves. Um, but also be aware that sometimes, like you said, emotions and things are there for a good reason. The guilt, the someone who might question what you're doing, it gives you an opportunity to look back and get a little bit more clarity on the situation, and just and help explain to yourself first why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and then start just living from that inner truth. It's hard for us to focus on the inner because we're so busy doing the outer. I mean, there's just a lot of things vying for our attention.
Yeah, definitely. I think we live in a world where you're constantly looking outside of yourself. There's so much information around us, from social media to the news to the internet to just life in general. And also, I think for a lot of creators, we tie a lot of our validation to the outside because it's like, well, if somebody likes it, it's almost like if they like my piece of art, then they actually like me as a human being. But I think that a lot of the time we have to separate those things and share a piece of art because you like it. And if somebody doesn't like it, that's not an attack on who you are innately as a human being. That's just a taste thing.
Hmm. Yeah. And that can be kind of a tough lesson to learn as a creative. I know for myself, making jewelry, and I go to a lot of outdoor events where I set up like a pop-up shop, and it, you know, I have lots of stuff out there. And it's so interesting that there's times when I see a piece of jewelry that's been hanging out there for quite a long time, and I'm thinking, nobody wants that. I'm just going to take it down and maybe restring it or, make something else out of it. And then the very next show, somebody purchases it, you know? And I think my automatic thing is because someone hasn't bought it right away that they don't like it. But everybody has different preferences, and we just need to understand that when the right person sees it, then they'll want it.
Yeah,
And
definitely. Everything has its own
not
home.
yeah, not beat up ourselves and think that, well, because nobody's bought it or nobody cares. It's just like you said, we kind of tie our um I don't know, tie our energy to theirs.
Yeah,
And
or it's like our self-worth to somebody liking it or
yes,
not, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's uh, a nice kind of piece to for people to think about is when you're sharing a piece or when you're sharing whatever it is you create, a piece of art, a song, a design, or whatever else, separating who you are from that thing. Once it's finished, it's no longer part of you. It's almost like you birthed it outside. Um, and that's something just to gently think about. I leave everybody with, or kind of guide us towards the end of the conversation with the same two questions for everybody that I'd love to ask you. The first one is kind of surrounding a lot of creatives work alone or are alone and sometimes feel a little bit misunderstood within that. So I think that this is a really great question just to kind of let everyone feel a bit more seen. So what would you say or what do you think is the most common misconception people have about either about you or it could be about the work that you do or both?
Wow, a common misconception. Uh, well, partly because of my jewelry, I make things that are what I call therapeutic. And so I work with copper, I work with magnets, and I work with aromatherapy jewelry. And I think a common misconception that is that it can't really work, that what you're doing, why are you doing that? Because that doesn't really work. That's all in your head. Um, and that's something jewelry wise, that people do. They have a misconception of that. And I'm not saying it works 100% for everybody, but so many people that we've met over the years, they love the value of magnets and copper and aromatherapy. So
Yeah, I love that. I've never heard of aromatherapy and jewelry. That's so cool. Check that out, definitely for sure. The second question is if you think back to like conversations that you've had in your life, maybe a particular conversation that really sticks out that comes to mind that you really remember. Who were you talking to and what did they say that stuck in your mind? It could be a piece of advice or it could just be like a one-liner that they said.
yes, I remember this one all the time. And it's been many, many years ago. I mean, even when my children were much younger. And I was speaking with a counselor, a mental health counselor, and she told me when we were talking about certain scenarios, she said, step aside. And I remember step aside because and this can relate to what we were just talking about, if that piece that you make, now that you've birthed it, it has its own entity. And when people say things or have a misconception or question what you do or have expectations that you just can't meet, just step aside as if it's not you that they're talking to. Because really, a lot of those expectations are based on what they want and not really what you need. So I love this. I've said it to myself years and years, and I say it to my clients: learn to step aside and separate yourself from what's going on. And if they're throwing those fiery darts, just step aside and let them hit the ground and not you.
Ooh, I love that. I really love that so much. I think that people will really resonate with that, and I hope that that sticks in your mind. Such an easy thing to stay in your mind. What a powerful, powerful thing to say. Love that. Definitely going to use that as well. Cindy, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you. I'll leave the links to everywhere to find you in the show notes, but just in case anyone's ready to find you right now, where is the best place they can look for you and your work?
Well, they can look on LinkedIn or on Facebook. That's kind of where I hang out most, under Cindy Brockway. Um, and I do have a Facebook community called Essentials for Peace and Balance, and they're welcome to join me there as well.
Love that. What about your jewelry?
My jewelry is Pine Branch Designs. It's on
Pine Branch
Etsy,
Designs.
and it's called
Love it.
pinebranchddesigns.etsy.com. So,
Love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'll, of course, leave all of those links to find you in the show notes.
okay.
Everyone listening, thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this, then do share it with someone, share it with a friend, or share it on socials. And if you do, then of course, tag us everywhere. But otherwise, thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Maverick Mind. I hope that you've loved it, and if you have, I would appreciate it so much if you would subscribe and write a 5-star review on wherever you're listening to this podcast from. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, I invite you to join me over on Instagram at Maverick Mind Co, or on my website maverickmind.elliefoden.com. And I'll see you in another podcast very soon.